But you know what? This is like very, very similar to the one on South Tryon we went to, and I had these 2 girls to myself.
Okay, I want you to do me a favor.
What?
Not today, not tomorrow, not next week. Because you can buy this shit for $13 a pound.
What shit?
The crabs that compare. Okay?
Okay.
Well, what I need to do is figure out is how hot the water has to be and how long do you have to cook them.
Oh. What kind of crabs they sell at Compare?
I need to look.
They might be blue crabs in the blue crab.
No. They were same color as these.
Doesn't that mean they were old?
No. They were not old.
Oh. The Dungeness or the king crabs?
You know what I'm gonna buy me?
What?
I'm gonna buy me one of those burners for outside by the grill. One of them big pots to put shit in it and
Cook it on the grill?
not cook it on the grill, but cook outside.
Like, what would you cook outside?
Huh?
What would you cook outside?
The crabs. You bring the water to a boil.
Oh, hold on a minute. You know what? Listen. Tickets.
Like some sort of vacation for you, Joe.
It is. We've not stopped, have we?
Hey, can I ask you, why don't you tell me the truth?
What, Daddy?
What do you think the chances of the council taking you to Spartanburg to get sandwiches would be?
Well, if we went to Greenville to see our friend, pretty high.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
But I done killed the monster sub, didn't I?
Yep. So tomorrow I put 3 waters.
No, because I had to get a Pepsi because I was getting kind of tired around the first break. So I had to get a Pepsi.
You got a Coke.
I know, but I had to have extra caffeine because I was tired. Shit.
Why don't you take your booster? You did?
No, I didn't take my booster at 9 a.m.
Oh, okay. Okay.
to use my credit card because he had some chips that I wanted to try because they sounded really good, and they were. They were mesquite barbecue chips, which I've never heard of.
Mesquite is a type of wood.
I know it's a type of wood, but I've never heard of them having mesquite barbecue chips.
Yeah, it's just oak soaked in coyote piss. That's all.
Oh, really?
You fucking.
Who knows? It wouldn't surprise me because nature's insane.
That's what you tell. That's one for you to Bruce. If you ever mentions, I like that mesquite grill. Tell him that's just oak soaked in coyote piss.
Oak soaked in coyote piss. Wow. Yep. Traffic's gonna be racist next week. You know why? Because school's back in session. Well, I usually get home at 5:45. I probably won't get home till 6:15 with the extra traffic.
Remains in the custody of MCSO. Both local baseball teams will be in action tonight. The Charlotte Knights are at home to take on the Memphis Redbirds. The Knights took down the Redbirds 4-3 in Game 2 of their 6-game series. They'll try to get another win this evening with the first pitch set for 7:04. The Cannonballers are out to the east to take on the Myrtle Beach Pelicans. They've lost the first 2 games of the series. Tonight they'll try to bounce back. First pitch in Myrtle Beach is at 7:05. And if you're headed to watch the Knights play at Truist Field, you may want to keep a poncho close. There's a 30% chance of showers and thunderstorms and a low near 72 degrees. Tomorrow, another hot day in Charlotte. Friday's high will be near 98 degrees and a heat index high is 105.
That's
right now,
racist.
It's a blistering 94 degrees in Charlotte. This is WFAE News. You can find more news anytime at WFAE.org or on the WFAE mobile app.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Katina Foundation, supporting the Asylum Seeker Advocacy Project, providing more than 100,000 asylum seekers in the U.S. with community and legal support. Learn more at asylum.news.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro in Washington.
And I'm Elsa Chang in Culver City, California. Former President Trump is en route to turn himself into a jail in Georgia. He faces 13 felony charges from failed efforts to overturn the state's 2020 presidential election. Trump has called these charges political persecution. Georgia Public Broadcasting's Stephen Fowler is outside the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta. Hi, Stephen.
And it's probably hot.
Hey there.
So set the scene for us where you are. What are you looking at?
So I am currently looking at one of the 2 entrances to the Fulton County Jail. I'm surrounded by a row of media. I drove in past protesters, both supporting and opposing former President Trump, parking next to a couple of Trump flags, for example. And there's a lot of police present. The already traffic-clogged roads of Atlanta are only going to get worse because several of them are already blocked off ahead of the motorcade. You know, it's not every day a former president gets booked into a county jail.
No, it is not every day that a former president gets booked at a county jail. But on that front, will he be treated any differently from other criminal defendants who routinely get processed at that jail?
Well, yes and no. On the one hand, Fulton County Sheriff Pat Labatt has said Trump will be treated the same, which means we should expect to see the first booking photo out of the 4 different indictments that he's done in the last 4 months. But he won't be led away in handcuffs or stay there any longer than necessary. It could take about 30 minutes. That's definitely faster than most people who enter this jail. And like many, his lawyers have negotiated a bond agreement beforehand with the the DA's office, $200,000. It also includes heightened restrictions on witness intimidation. It's still an unprecedented event to have a former American president booked into a local jail, even with this streamlined processing.
Unprecedented indeed. Okay, let's just remind listeners why Trump is there in the first place. He already faces charges for trying to overturn the 2020 election, but at the federal level, these are, of course, local charges. Just walk us through this case real quick.
Well, Elsa, long story short, Fulton County DA Fani Willis alleges that Trump was the center of a, quote, criminal enterprise, this conspiracy to illegally overturn the 2020 election loss in Georgia. Unlike the federal charges last month, the state-level charges, one, under an expansive racketeering law. It's got 18 other co-defendants. Two, it zeroes in on efforts to get state-level officials to illegally overturn the election results. And three, he can't be pardoned by himself or anyone else other than a state-appointed pardons and parole board, but only after the end of any sentence.
Right, because these are state charges. Okay, all 19 defendants in this case are supposed to turn themselves in by tomorrow afternoon. What should we expect next at that point?
Well, this is a very complicated case, and there's a fire hose of developments coming nonstop. Here's a couple of them that illustrate how complex it'll be with 19 different people, 19 different sets of lawyers, and 19 different levels of involvement. For example, there's a federal court hearing Monday where former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is seeking to have his case removed from state court and dismissed altogether, while another defendant, lawyer Kenneth Chesebro, wants a speedy trial. The district attorney says okay and is now asking for all 19 people, including Trump, to have that trial by the end of October. It'll be up to a judge to decide that. And Donald Trump has a new lawyer leading the case in Georgia. He's an accomplished defense attorney named Steve Sadow, who's defended rappers and racketeering cases, including the other high-profile RICO case playing out in Atlanta right now with hip-hop artist Young Thug. That's just a small look at what will be happening moving forward.
Rappers and racketeering. I like it. That is Georgia Public Broadcasting. Stephen Fowler. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you.
That DA loves that RICO Act. The rap community in Atlanta is shitting bricks over it.
350 million gallons. That's how much radioactive wastewater Japan has stored at the now-defunct Fukushima nuclear power plant, which melted down after a massive earthquake and tsunami in 2011. The government began releasing some of that water into the Pacific Ocean today. International inspectors have approved the plan to release the water slowly over decades. Still, many people are concerned. NPR's Jeff Brumfield and Kat Lonsdorf are here to talk us through the science behind the decision. Good to have you both in the studio.
Harry.
Hello. Kat, you made a reporting trip to Fukushima in 2020. You went to the Daiichi nuclear power plant. Why is there so much radioactive water there?
So the water comes from a couple of sources. First, it's water that was used to cool the reactors when they melted down in 2011. But then they've also had to continue pumping water in to cool those same reactors. Even though they're offline and being decommissioned, you can't just turn a nuclear reactor off. And then there's also groundwater that's filtered into the site over the years. So this water keeps building up. It's being stored in these giant tanks right now. There are about 1,000 on the site. I went to see them when I was there, and they just stretch on for as far as the eye can see, and that was 3 years ago, so they're really running out of room now. Managing and storing that water safely has been a huge problem, which is why the government has been treating it to release it.
And Jeff, what does that actually mean to treat these 350 million gallons of water?
It all comes down to one word, Ari, which is filtration. The Japanese government's basically built the world's largest Brita filter. And what they're trying to do is basically remove as many of the radioactive elements as they can. So these are things like strontium and cesium, which are dangerous for humans and animals. And they can get those down below government safety limits. But there is a radioactive isotope they can't get rid of, and that's called tritium. Tritium is an isotope of hydrogen. And hydrogen is, part of H2O. It's part of the water itself. So they can't filter it, and that's something that's made this plan controversial. Now, I should say that tritium isn't the most dangerous radioactive element out there. It doesn't build up inside plants and animals, and it has a half-life of just 12 years, as opposed to something like uranium-235, which sticks around for 700 million years. So it could be worse.
And Ari, I think some helpful context here is that, for better or worse, functioning nuclear power plants around the world release tritium regularly for the reasons Jeff just explained. We haven't figured out a way to filter it out of water. So, not to pile on, but this is happening all over the place. There are standards that have been set for it, and in some places it's happening at levels much higher than what we're seeing in this release.
And yet there is still local and regional objections, which we'll talk about in a moment. First, tell us how Japan is actually putting this water into the ocean.
There are a couple steps. First, they're going to dilute the radioactive water so that there's a lot less tritium in every drop. The government says that they will bring tritium levels to well below all safety limits. Then they're going to take that diluted water and pass it through a super long tunnel under the seafloor to a point off the coast of Fukushima and the Pacific Ocean. And that will dilute it further. And like you said, Ari, they're not just dumping it all in. They're going to do this slowly. It's going to take decades to empty out those tanks.
You've both been talking with a lot of scientists about this plan. What are they telling you?
So generally, most scientists seem to agree that this will have a negligible impact on the environment if it's done to plan. I talked to Jim Smith. He's a professor of environmental science at Portsmouth University in the UK. He's been studying radioactivity in waterways impacted by nuclear waste for decades.
The risk is really, really, really low. And I would call it not a risk at all. We've got to put radiation in perspective, and the planned release, if it's done properly, then the doses that people get and the doses that the ecosystem get just won't be significant, in my opinion.
But even if that's true, not all scientists think this is a good idea. I spoke to Ken Bissler at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. He worries about the precedent Japan sets by doing this, even though he agrees the ocean will dilute the radioactivity.
It's a big place. We're not going to suffer directly from the doses from this, but it's one of the many things we're adding to our ocean that if you have an alternative, we certainly should consider more fully. And I don't think that's been done in the past couple of years.
And Bissler's also worried that even small quantities of contaminants missed by that filtration system I mentioned could slowly accumulate in the sediments around the plant. That could cause problems for local fisheries down the road.
Our colleague Anthony Kuhn was reporting from Fukushima yesterday, where people are worried. There have been protests in South Korea. China has banned seafood from the area. Are people overreacting?
No, I don't think people in Fukushima are overreacting at all. I mean, during and immediately after the disaster, the government and TEPCO, that's the company that runs the nuclear power plant, were both pretty deceitful with data and information. They've since apologized and are trying to be more transparent, but there's this deep distrust that's still there. And Fukushima is a big fishing area. So even if scientists say that the fish from there is fine, if people around the world don't trust that and won't buy it, that's not good.
There's a geopolitical side to this as well. There's a history of radioactive contamination in the Pacific. It was the site of nuclear testing during the Cold War, and many Pacific Island nations suffered the consequences. Ken Bissler is working with some of them, and he told me the trauma runs deep. Some of these islands are still off limits. So the idea of a developed country using the Pacific to unload its radioactive wastewater just upsets quite a few people on principle.
NPR's Jeff Brumfield and Kat Lonsdorf, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Before candidates even spoke during last night's Republican presidential debate, this song took the stage.
Rich men go for Richmond, Lord knows they all just want to have total control.
It's called Rich Men North of Richmond, and it's sung by a previously unknown artist named Oliver Anthony. The song is now topping the Billboard 100 chart. Dig into the lyrics and you'll find extremist narratives and references to conspiracy theories. Hear that conversation on Morning Edition from NPR News.
Wow.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
6:18, still more All Things Considered ahead. We're on 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org.
I'm just getting home right now.
Just ahead, a federal ruling would allow tens of thousands of formerly incarcerated felons to regain voting rights in Mississippi.
I would just
the state is looking to
have
overturn
been
that
getting
decision.
home now.
More on that is coming up next. And then coming up on Marketplace at 6:30, as pandemic-era school funding is coming to an end, districts have to rethink their bottom line. What that means for students and schools. More on that coming up in about 10 minutes on Marketplace. The Charlotte region is cooking right now. It's 94 degrees with partly cloudy skies. A slight chance of some rain this evening. Lows tonight near 72. And tomorrow could see a high near 98 degrees with a heat index of 100 or more.
That's racist.
Support comes from WFAE listeners and from Hendrick Acura, offering over 200 new and certified pre-owned vehicles, open in-store and online with pickup and delivery options available. Details and availability online at hendrickacura.com. And from UNC Asheville, working to engage the next generation of engineers, artists, and entrepreneurs with 65 academic programs plus undergraduate research. Fall applications accepted at unca.edu.
This debate did very little to clarify anything, especially because the two people who had standout performances represent, in one case, Mike Pence's the historic version of conservatism, and Vivek Ramaswamy, who's trying to represent Trumpism and the future of the party.
I'm Michael Barbaro. That's Today on the Daily from the New York Times.
Join us this evening at 7:30 on 90.7 WFAE.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Dataiku, a platform for everyday AI to help organizations make AI part of their daily business, designed to elevate people, teams, and companies. DATAIKU.com. And from Procter & Gamble, maker of Align Probiotic, a daily supplement designed by gastroenterologists to help relieve occasional bloating, gas, and abdominal discomfort. More at alignprobiotics.com. This is NPR.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Elsa Chang. A federal court ruling earlier this month would allow as many as 30,000 formerly incarcerated people who were convicted of felonies to regain their voting rights in Mississippi. But as Mississippi Public Broadcasting's Michael McEwen reports, the state is looking to overturn that decision on appeal.
Mississippians convicted of any one of 22 felonies are prohibited from voting, even after completing their sentences. Veronica Bilbo was previously convicted of a qualifying felony and has been released, but barred from voting for 4 years.
It's what we think of as a fundamental right, as a citizen. And then to have that taken away, when you've done your time, you've been productive, you had zero recidivism, and then, as a black woman, knowing the price was paid for us to be able to go and vote, then find out we can't. Right? Turn up punishment.
Early this month, a 3-judge panel said the Mississippi law was cruel and unusual punishment and in violation of the 8th Amendment. The majority said Mississippi stands as an outlier among other states that maintain lifetime felon voting bans. In 1974, the last time the U.S. Supreme Court considered the constitutional standing of such laws, 32 states had them. Today, the number is less than half that.
That's frankly very much the argument we made to the court.
Attorney John Youngwood represented 6 Mississippians who had had their voting rights stripped.
The last time the Supreme Court had a case on this issue, the status of the laws in the country were very, very different. The vast majority of states would not permit a former felon to vote. There is now a growing consensus and a firm consensus in the country that forbidding people to vote for the rest of their lives for a crime they commit when they're very young is not appropriate.
The state of Mississippi has now appealed the decision, arguing it would, quote, inflict profound damage and widespread confusion. They want the full Fifth Circuit Court to rule. The earlier 3-judge panel featured 2 Democratic nominees, but the full court is often thought of as one of the most conservative in the country. That is cast doubt over the ruling's future. For NPR News, I'm Michael McEwen in Jackson, Mississippi.
Last night, 8 of the Republican candidates running for president took the debate stage for the first time, and while they agreed on a lot, one major point of disagreement was Russia's war on Ukraine. Here are candidates Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, and Chris Christie in a debate on the Fox News channel last night.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you would not support an increase of funding to Ukraine.
I would not. And I think that this is disastrous, that we are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border.
I will have Europe pull their weight. Right now, they're not doing that. If we don't stand up against this type of autocratic killing in the world, we will be next.
The elephant not in the room, as the moderator put it, was former President Donald Trump. And in an interview with Tucker Carlson, Trump criticized Biden's handling of the war.
That's a war that should end immediately, not because of one side or the other, because hundreds of thousands of people are being killed.
Let's talk about what this disagreement could mean for the people fighting and providing aid to the war. NPR's Brian Mann is in Ukraine, just east of Kharkiv, and NPR Pentagon correspondent Tom Bowman is here in the studio. Hi, guys.
Hey, Ari. Hey there, Ari.
Tom, how concerned are the war's supporters that skepticism of U.S. aid to Ukraine seems to be growing?
Well, right, Ari, we heard from that debate. There's a division within the Republican Party between internationalists like Nikki Haley, who support Ukraine and are concerned about Russian aggression spreading, and the so-called American First Wing, of course, led by former President Trump. There is concern among Ukraine backers that support could erode, especially on Capitol Hill. Republican Congressman Andy Harris, who, by the way, Ari, is co-chair of the Ukraine caucus, said recently the Ukrainian counteroffensive has failed, does not think Ukraine can win, and he's not sure he'll support more military aid. That has concerned Ukraine supporters like Congressman Adam Smith, the top Democrat on armed services. He told me they will have to work hard to shore up support in the coming months. Now, the U.S. already has provided around $76 billion since the Russian invasion 18 months ago. That's out of $113 billion authorized by Congress. Now, the Biden administration, Ari, is seeking another $40 billion, most of that for military aid.
And Brian, when you talk to people in Ukraine, how aware are they that there is not a consensus here in the U.S., and what would it mean for them if the U.S. did cut aid or tried to force Ukraine to accept a peace deal that gave Russia part of the country?
Yeah, all right, people here are watching this really closely, and they say any big drawback by the U.S. would be devastating. You know, they've paid an enormous human price resisting Russia's invasion. Also, civilian populations have suffered these very well-documented war crimes. But it's not only Ukrainians watching this debate in the U.S. You know, right now the U.S. leads a big coalition against Moscow. You know, countries like Bulgaria and Poland that are relying on Washington's leadership. If we pulled the plug in Ukraine, it would potentially unravel that coalition. Also important to point out that the U.S. isn't only countering Russia here in Ukraine. Russia's opposed U.S. interests for years in Africa, the Middle East, and in cyberspace. So, you know, giving Putin a win, as Ramaswamy described it, that would resonate well beyond the war zone where I am now.
We've been hearing for months about what a struggle Ukraine's counteroffensive has been. Tom, could that failure to make quick, decisive advances on the battlefield further erode U.S. support?
No, I think it could. And really from the beginning, Ari, there were doubts in the Pentagon about how much Ukraine could achieve in this counteroffensive by the fall. People I talked with suggested only modest gains. Now, the goal, of course, in the south is to break the so-called land bridge between Russia and Crimea. That would be a huge achievement and isolate Crimea, Putin's big prize. But so far, the Ukrainians have been making some gains, but face 3 lines of Russian defenses that are formidable. Landmines are the big problem, tens of thousands of them. Now, the U.S. and Britain have told Ukraine, you're spreading your forces too thin along the front line, and you have to concentrate those troops for a big push, a big punch in the south, using the Western-trained troops to, again, break that land bridge. We'll see if they take that advice, and officials say time is of the essence, because when the fall comes, the rains come, and everything just slows down.
Brian, you've been near the front lines. What do the Ukrainians tell you about how their counteroffensive is going?
Yeah, they acknowledge that it's hard. I was with Ukraine's defense minister, Alexei Reznikov, this week, and he said, yeah, things are slow. The Russians are actually on the offensive near where I'm at now. Russian troops attacking a Ukrainian city called Kupiansk, triggering a new wave of refugees. Reznikov dismissed that battle as an effort to distract Ukraine and divert troops. It's also worth saying the Ukrainians, while they're struggling right now, they do continue to score small victories. In the last 24 hours, we saw an amphibious assault, Ukrainian officials say was carried out by their commandos in Russian-occupied Crimea.
So while the big fight is grinding and costly, Ukrainians say they are still landing significant blows.
And Tom, does that square with what you're hearing from military and other sources in the U.S.?
Well, there are mixed messages again, but a Washington think tank is following all this close. So the Institute for the Study of War, they're pretty optimistic about the situation and believe the Ukrainians could soon threaten that second line of Russian defenses, the second of 3. But again, we'll just have to see. Now, Congressman Adam Smith told me he's neither pessimistic nor optimistic about the counteroffensive. He said the Ukrainians have well-trained troops, and this will all take a lot of time. But again, if there's little progress by late fall, it will only raise more questions about continued support, especially as a presidential campaign heats up.
That is NPR's Brian Mann in Kharkiv, Ukraine, and Pentagon correspondent Tom Bowman here in the studio. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay.
We were like that in the American Revolution, like we were fighting the big guys and...
Yeah, but we're fighting for our country.
Yep, they are too.
They are too, with our money. Well, I guess we fought with France's money and stuff like that.
Yeah. We did, France. France was like, these guys are making some moves. We should help them because fuck England. That's what they were thinking.
Don't forget your lunchbox.
I know, I got it. I'm not going to take my lunchbox tomorrow.
I know.
The weather outside is racist, but I still really love the Panthers. And me and my daddy are crazy, so we're going to the game any freaking way. Right, Daddy?
Yeah. Sometimes you do for you.
Yeah. Luckily, the beer at Roaring Riot is free. For $3. I bet you, maybe the doghouse is permanent, but I bet you, I wouldn't be surprised if it was temporary and they go back to their other spot in the regular season.
I don't know, Joe.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did that because we're going inside tomorrow.
Were you able to find anything out?
No. We'll just go see. It doesn't matter where we are. We're going to have a good time, and there's going to be a dance floor, and we're all like-minded, well, aside from a few infiltrators. And they're going to have you, and you're just going to throw me in the middle of the dance floor like Murphy's.
Yeah.
Picking up chicks and roaring like a panther. Sounds like a great night.
Yeah.
Right, Daddy? That was fun. Wasn't it, Daddy?
Yeah.
Yay! We're in the shade tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right, Daddy?
Yeah.
Now, Dad, you know what you should do? Maybe today, maybe tonight, or maybe tomorrow. You should put walking. You should look at walking directions from the stadium to Lost and Found. I just want you to see what I'm talking about. So you don't think I just want to go down for a walk down Mint Street. So you don't think I'm bullshitting you.
Okay.
And then when you get done at that, look at the walking to the train from the stadium and from the train to Lost and Found.
Yeah.
you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because you have to go, if you walk to the train, you have to go across the street grid. You have to go across Tryon. And then when you walk to the club from the train, you have to go back across Tryon the way you came. And you walk to the train and you got to deal with getting on that sardine can and getting off 2 stops later.
Okay.
What you doing?
Relaxing.
Oh.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I could pull it up and show you now if you want.
No.
I mean, you could take my word for it if you want, because, like,
I'm not going to take your word for it. I can always do that later.
Yeah, but you know I'm not bullshitting you. Because I did my research about that.